Yeah, so I guess we'll get down to the nitty gritty. So, which alien race actually constructed the pyramids?
Well, it'd have to be the really, really tall ones because it's a tall building.
I was saying, that's the one thing that was a breath of fresh air when I kind of stumbled across your information, started reading up on you. Is that you actually have a very plausible idea of how the Great Pyramids were made, and most folks I talk to that claim they know the secrets of the Great Pyramids are just way out in left field. And I was very relieved that you're actually a sensible guy.
I appreciate that. You mentioned aliens right off the bat, but people that contend that aliens built the Great Pyramid are also saying ancient people weren't smart enough to build the Great Pyramid, but they don't say that out loud. So that's something to remember. That's kind of the flip side of the ancient aliens idea.
Yeah, I don't know, that was something that always kind of bugged me about the whole ancient aliens thing, is that you're kind of whitewashing a large portion of history, and you're kind of taking away the accomplishments of, these primitive peoples and their stoneworking skills, and you're just kind of filling it in with like American folklore. And I always found the actual history and skill sets that these people had to develop far more interesting than any kind of conspiracy theory or mythology that's out there.
Well, I certainly agree. I wrote two books and produced two documentaries about how ancient geniuses, not aliens, uh, assembled the Great Pyramid. They went through all the trouble of constructing this large public works projects, and they didn't need, I don't think, alien help to do it.
Yeah, so I guess how did you get interested first in kind of the history of the pyramids? What kind of drew you to it? Was it kind of a childhood fascination, or was it something you kind of got into later on in life?
Mainly as an early adult, young adult. My technical background, my background is technical. I have a technical degree, amateur radio operator,
Mhm.
FCC, general commercial class license, and a whole bunch of certificates and all of that. So very technical background, and I collect antique gasoline engines. I like that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And when in high school, when I studied history, I was more interested in the range that airplanes could fly, and the bomb loads the bombs could and the battleships and the submarines. I was interested in that more than politics. So if a person likes history and technology, pretty soon they're going to look at the pyramid because it's a 45-story skyscraper built in very ancient times, and it exhibits a lot of high technology.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of folks often attribute the Romans with first developing like water locks and barge systems, as well as aqueduct systems. But your theory is that the Egyptians were able to create this sort of system to be able to. I mean, was it mostly for like moving the materials of the pyramids, or what do you think the purpose of the pyramids were?
Well, when you say Egyptians, who built the Great Pyramid is beyond the scope of my research, as well as when it was built. So it may have been built by people in the Valley of the Nile that were pre-dynastic times or whenever. But yes, they used water locks and barges to move a massive amount of stone and heavy payloads from the catch basin in the Nile all the way up to the building site. So it's interesting that the Erie Canal here in the United States was 4.5 feet deep, but the barges had a capacity of 70 tons. So in the 1830s, people could move 70-ton payloads, but here in modern times, Egyptology has never moved a 70-ton payload 1 inch.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you think there's so much misconceptions around the pyramids in general? I mean, do you think it's just the I don't want to say false information, but the preconceived notions of a lot of Egyptologists over the years?
Well, Egyptology, its genesis of that science was tomb robbers. And, back in the 1800s and that type of thing, they were stealing things from tombs and selling them to museums.
Yeah.
And the difference between a tomb robber and an Egyptologist is that a tomb robber doesn't have a college education, but an Egyptologist does. But the main reason why there's so much misunderstanding, misconceptions, and falsehoods, misinformation that has shrouded the Great Pyramid is because it's been studied using some rather poor research methods. And those poor research methods produce false information. So that's it right there.
Yeah, and I also think that has a lot to do with like the occult reformation of the 1800s and just or the I should say like the 1860s to 1880s, and just the Egyptian craze that Britain and some of these European countries had at the time. What really fueled that grave robbing that you were talking about. But to kind of fuel this craze, a lot of the academic researchers of history at the time, um they wrote a lot more about mythology than they did actual history when it comes to that. So I feel like the pop culture craze of Egyptology of that specific period really kind of set back Egyptology as a science in general.
Oh, yeah. Egyptology is actually a science in crisis because it refuses to use the scientific method, certainly in regards to how the Great Pyramid was assembled. They will declare edicts about a big ramp
Mhm.
and about strong backed knuckle draggers and that type of thing. But in terms of producing any type of demonstration, they are sorely lacking. So a lot of people that I know that's past the eighth grade do not even believe this precision stone cutting using hand tools because it's never been demonstrated. And another thing that has fueled the misconception surrounding the Great Pyramid is before that craze in terms of Egyptology that you were talking about, there was this idea that the Great Pyramid was somehow associated with the Holy Bible.
Hmm.
That the pyramid inch and the Great Pyramid confirms Bible prophecy, and the Ark of the Covenant was stored in the coffer and all of that, and the Bethlehem angle, you can look that up, that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Great Pyramid predicts the birthplace of Jesus and all of that. And that's all derived using a whole host of very poor research methods. And it's all hokum, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, once you start, looking at, the serious history of Egypt and, and the different dynasties, it really starts to shatter all those biblical myths that were kind of perpetuated around those times. Because, I mean, once again, I feel like a lot of that was just trying to make Egyptology or, the aesthetic of Egypt in that time more pleasing to a European audience. But yeah, I mean, even if you look at like the northern tribes and the Hyksos that would have invaded Egypt, briefly during that time, there's absolutely no hard evidence of any sort of Jewish enslavement or anything related to biblical myth, historically in Egyptian history, dynasty to dynasty, and they kept pretty good records for the most part.
Well, they did, but what I'm saying is, I'm talking not about that as much, but about people applying some poor research methods to come up with some conclusions that are blatantly false. They've come up with a lot of correlations between a data point on the Great Pyramid and a data point on the Bible, but those two data points aren't joined with causation, if you will. They're
Right.
just two things that people just see, like a cloud in the sky that looks like a puppy and my puppy. Well, there's no real correlation between those two things. The cloud didn't form to meet the shape of my puppy, and my puppy didn't evolve to match the shape of the cloud. So it's just some correlation that people see, but they're false because they're not derived using valid research methods. So, but that's one other thing that has influenced the study of the Great Pyramid.
Yeah, I mean that's just kind of how the human brain is wired though. Like we want to see patterns everywhere. Going back to conspiracy theorists again, that's one of the that's one of the biggest thing that always frustrates me talking to some of these folks who, hold those ancient alien mythos is that just because, you want to see a pattern, it doesn't necessarily make it valid that, there is a correlation between those two things, because causation doesn't necessarily equal correlation at all.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. So we're kindred spirits on that regards. But the Great Pyramid, though, it was built, and it's like an out of place artifact, if you will. Extreme precision from distant antiquity, and a huge cost to build. So it's there. The stark reality of it has to be resolved. Our ancient ancestors created that, and how they did it, and why would they do such a thing has become my life quest.